สวัสดีค่ะ
Welcome to
Fairagora ชวนคุย
podcast ของเราวันนี้นะคะจะพูดเรื่อง climate change ค่ะ
วันนี้จะพูดเป็นภาษาอังกฤษ so today our podcast will run in English
and with our special guest.
Okay, let he introduce himself.
So I'm Geoffrey Daugé. I'm an engineering student from France, from CentraleSupélec, and I'm passionate about global warming, how to tackle it, and that's why I'm here today. And that's why also I started this internship at Fairagora.
Okay, so I will let Jeff explain to us what is the climate change and what is going on in the world right now.
Climate change, so there has been like a consensus since the last IPCC's report, a scientific consensus that climate change is caused by humans. And what is it about? It's the changes in weather conditions, but of long-term periods, whether it's about short-term periods like days or a week, whereas climate is about how weather conditions evolve over a year, decades, or even centuries. And we now know that we will change weather conditions, climate, on many decades because of our actions, and especially the use of fossil fuels, land use, and deforestation.
So climate change is the act of human activity that cause the raising of temperature overall.
Yeah, that's it. There's no doubt about it. Not anymore. Whereas there are still millions of people who don't believe in global warming, which is kind of crazy.
Do you think this is like very big concern, like the world problem?
For me, it's a concern that millions of people don't know about it. But I don't know if people don't want to hear about it, or media also have a role in this game. It's a really interesting subject, but I'm not like, I love many subjects about global warming, but this thing about understanding how media or manipulating maybe information, this is not like my top topic.
Everyone should be aware that there is global warming, climate change is happening because of human acts.
Definitely.
And what kind of the human actions that you think is a very base concern and we should pay attention to it or make change?
Basically, we are facing an urgency to act to reduce our environmental impact. So all main activity sectors that are a source of emissions, so industry, land use, agriculture, transport, every sector should be concerned about it, and this is an urgency. So there isn't like, oh, you will act first and I will act later. No, this won't work at all. Even if all sectors put many efforts, we don't know for the moment if we will manage to handle this, to tackle this issue. So every sector.
In terms of the huge problem of global warming, is there any specific event that stuck to you that you feel like this is really crazy how it happened so fast, or like because of the global warming thing that happened due to global warming that you just like, this is so crazy, never happened before?
I would say fires. Like for example, in California, there was a picture showing that for like 3/4 of the fires that happened in California happened between, it was something like 2000 and before, whereas 1/4 of fires that happened in California were during the last 20 years. It's crazy, it's really striking, and this is also why I follow many mostly independent media specialize on climate, environment, biodiversity, all topics related to environment. To be aware of that, and to know to get as much knowledge as possible as I can. So I'm passionate about this subject, so I love it.
Everyone should be passionate about it, just like Jeff.
Yeah. And if we looking back to our consumption, like every day we eat, we use, we consume, what is the climate change behind the line supply chain?
Yeah, like all actors have responsibility. We can like split them in like kind of category of actors. So there are people who can influence global warming on their consumption, mainly on of goods and services. But for example, if you live like 50 kilometers from your work and there are no trains, etc., you have to take a car. Well, you'll take a car. There are limits of that. So governments and public actors have a lot of powers, and there are also, and the third one is private sector. So everyone should act, and whereas sometimes you can hear, oh, but if the private sector doesn't do that, I will not change my behavior. Like everyone has to move to really change drastically their habits, their way of living, etc. From now on.
Yeah, and like when we talk about the consumption and about the food, the climate change that was produced behind the line of this thing. I used to heard about the farming practices, behavior of the farmers. Do you have any ideas about this to share?
There are many good practices about farming, like mulching, for example, or not burning sugar canes, using the right amount of fertilizers if you really need that, but sometimes you don't need them, etc. But most farmers are not aware of that, or government don't put in place incentives for farmers to do so. So, but I was talking about everyone has to take good decisions at the same time. Yeah, government, private sector, the consumer, etc. They have to put in place all those good practices, which can have a huge impact. For example, on the carbon footprint, but there's also water, the impact on water, on biodiversity, soil, etc., etc.
And it's very like good that everyone taking the decision together, and then like we walk together to do this process.
Yeah, and data should be also recorded about these practices, and that's why I think Fairagora's mission is really, yeah, it's really good, and it's amazing to provide this software solution.
Like we use the data in the useful ways.
Yeah, not to make gadgets like an Apple Watch, for example, or anything like IoT, like most IoT or shit.
Um, I want to get back to the point where you were talking about all of the sector have to help each other out in terms of reducing the carbon footprint and all of your consumption maybe. Is there anything from the either private sector, government sector, or as an individual that very much works so well from the policy that they created to reduce the climate change, to make it shorter in terms of like the rising of temperature?
Oh yeah, so you mean are they like good
Policy,
students, the
no,
one who managed to drastically reduce for the
um,
last years, like carbon footprint?
yeah, something like that. But also, is there any example of the policy that works really well from the
Oh yeah,
government side, or
yeah.
is there any act or policy together from the private sector that put out and then try to do something different.
Yeah, there has been a striking example that worked really well for govern, actions from government in air conditioning. You know, there are gases, or liquids that are used, and some of them are way more harmful to the ozone layer. And there was a huge problem because the ozone layer was been like really harmed, yet destroyed, and then all governments all over the world took the decision to, like, it would be forbidden to produce them and so to consume them, and now the ozone layer nearly went back at its original like shape.
So that's something from the government policy.
Yeah.
Anything from the private sector that trying to commit to the global climate change?
Yeah. For example, from big companies, French big companies called the Michelin, they make mostly tires, and they completely changed their business model for B2B. They went from just selling tires to only selling the use of tires, which means that truck companies and transportation companies do not own tires anymore. They just like borrow them, and they pay per kilometers they drive, and this like indirectly pushed Michelin itself to make put in place a circular economy, because they want tire to last as long as possible. They want it to be really resistant, etc. So yeah, business as usual is no longer possible. You have to take drastic actions, and this is a good example. But there are many of them, but they are for the moment, and hopefully not a lot of them. There are only a few.
So one company have to make their commitment align with everyone action on climate change.
I could feel that only one company or one person could not succeed this. They have to like hold the hand, although with the government, private sector, public sector, and do it together.
Mostly the public sector is the one who can drive everything about legislation of fertilizers, for example, or emissions from cars, etc. But personally, I believe that huge companies have a big responsibility for that, and they should repair what they've done in the past. They harmed climate change. Like climate change is like could be considered as a crime because it will kill people, and it has already started. For example, with fires, people died, and so indirectly, companies like Total are criminals. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and also like we as a consumer, actually we are the one who will be part of that. So impact.
Yeah, but we can, as I said, yeah, we cannot control everything we consume because we can only consume what's on the plate, and if there's no alternative solution on the plate, we can have to pick it.
So everyone will see that Jeff has many inspirations. And how do you get all the inspirations inside you?
Mainly thanks to two things, I would say, curiosity and social media. Especially on social media, you can like I picked only the form of contents that I like the more. For example, if I had only like 10-20 minutes, I would pick a podcast about it. Or if I have way more time, I could like attend a class about it. Or I can watch a movie, a documentary, anything. There are many different media about it, and this is how I get like many sources of information, and that allows you also to train critical mindset to be critical about it, because often you can just, if you decide to follow only one leader of on global warming, for example, you can first misinformation, or if the author just is like doesn't really tell the truth, or is only focusing on one part of global warming. For example, if he only focuses on carbon footprint, whereas there are also problems with biodiversity, etc., you can miss knowledge. And so being curious, I think, is the basics of everything I learned.
Yeah, I think this is a good, like, you can use your time really usefully, and like you fill your mind with the useful knowledge, and you can create a good impact to the world.
Yeah, for me, it's not a race. This is just a path, like a, yeah, just like I know that in like next year I will have way more knowledge than I have now, but I'm just okay. I have time, so I can use it usefully, and I will see what I will learn in 1 year.
And do you have any books to recommend to the listeners now? Maybe they can read.
Um, Quite a lot of them, but the one, if I had only one book to recommend you, it would be The Limits to Growth from Dennis Meadows, which is also called Club's Run Report, which shows that with the capitalism system we have, either we continue doing business as usual and we just hit the wall, and it will be really hard, and people will die, people will starve, or people are already starving, but way more and more, etc. Or we can, like in the car, decide to slow down as much as possible, and maybe hit a small wall.
Mm. Yes, I think I was thinking to find the book to read it too. I hope, yeah.
We will make another podcast on that book
Oh.
after you read the book. So get back before no about the book. So it's talk about how capitalism is fasten the global warming because it's making people doing more action.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to say that only the system is like is responsible for global warming, but it's only about science and economics. So it do not do, like um, it's not saying that capitalism is responsible for that.
Ah,
It just talks about, okay, the system is as it is, but we all live in the capitalism system. So
yeah, right.
this was just my interpretation of that.
So can you talk more on the company commitment to to reduce their to reduce the global warming, the action due to what happened from the maybe the COP26 that just happened, or like anything that the company are trying to do to reduce the global warming.
Well, there are like voluntary policies, and there are mandatory ones. Mandatory
Okay.
ones, for example, like in Europe, there is a carbon market for from like the basics of industry, like when you produce iron,
Mm.
this kind of stuff. You have a quota, a
Mhm.
limit of carbon emissions you can emit,
Mhm.
and otherwise, if you emit more than you're allowed to, you have to buy these carbon stocks, like
Mhm.
credits, we say.
So this is
It is
carbon credit, which
carbon
is
credit.
a requirement.
This is mandatory. This is a
Uh-huh.
requirement, but only for it concerns only a few actors.
Mm.
And then there are
Voluntary.
voluntary other ones. Yeah. Um, for example, SBTI is Science Based Target Initiative. which is like a framework for big companies to to be certified. SBTI means that your climate strategy of your company will be like it's aligned with Paris Agreement goals to be either responsible for 1.5 degrees of global warming or 2 or way below 2 or become net zero by 2050, for example. But there are also, well, this is not really a framework, but another voluntary things that company can do is carbon offsets,
Carbon offset.
which are quite, how do you say that, controversial.
Okay. I got new 3 words, which is big word. I didn't learn it before. So 1.5, 2 degree, net zero, and then carbon offset.
Offsets. Yeah.
Carbon offset. Okay. These, what are they mean? The definition of all these, it's like,
Interesting.
oh my god.
I'm sorry. Carbon offsets is that you pay someone to stock carbon to in trees, for example. You'll pay someone who will finance an NGO maybe to create a new forest, for example.
Okay, because your company probably creating a lot of carbon to the environment into the world, and then so you're trying to offset it by telling someone to spend money and then getting more of
Yeah,
the.
but this is controversial
Uh-huh.
because this is still business as usual. Like it pushes companies not to reduce their carbon.
Right.
Well, they are responsible for these emissions. If carbon is stocked in the forest, for example, if there is a beginning of a fire, all the carbon, the CO2 that was stocked will come back to the atmosphere. There are also social impacts because of carbon offsets, for example. If you decide to plant a lot of trees, I don't know, if in Africa, I don't know, maybe in this country, people don't have as much land as they would, as they need to produce food. So this is like a land war between people who've got money and who can just plant trees to not to be responsible, and people who just want to eat to live. So and yeah, so carbon offsets is we could like do a whole podcast about it.
Right.
It's
Okay.
crazy.
Another word, net zero.
Net zero is basically so you emit emissions and you can also stock emissions. And net zero means that you you compensate as much emissions as you produce. That's the idea.
Is it? Is it like carbon offset, but you didn't pay someone to do it for you?
Well, you can. Well, so there are different kind of frameworks that about being net zero, but you can either like stock carbon in your value chain, for example, in your supply chain. For example, if a farmer is responsible for emissions because he used artificial fertilizers, if he stocks carbon in trees, maybe I don't know, he planted around his field, he can stock as much carbon as he emitted, for example. So this is like when you do it inside your value chain, but you can also do it with carbon offsets, which are like you'll pay someone who will maybe pay someone who will plant trees or other stuff.
Okay, so it's a different way to do it.
Yeah, and so it's better to do it in your own value chain because you can have a look at it and you take full responsibility for what is done there. Yeah, so it's still better. But the main priority should be to reduce first the carbon emissions and then at the end, when you cannot reduce them at all, you're completely like, full, then you should plant trees or mangroves, or there are many kind of projects.
What about the 1.5 and 2 Celsius?
Oh yeah, it's that thanks to IPCC we know that um, if
The
we
science base.
yeah oh no, IPCC means International Panel on Climate Change.
Okay,
So
IPCC.
these are the top experts of the world, researchers based mainly on climate change, and they make a consensus each, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, because it takes a while to gather data. Then they make a consensus of that. And so thanks to them, we know that if we emit, I don't know, a few dozens of millions of CO2, there will be this amount of global warming. We measure global warming thanks to the average temperature on Earth. And so we know that if we want to live in a world where most people can eat, most people can live, etc., we have to make, like, global warming shouldn't be more than 2 degrees. It should be less than 2 degrees. And so there are companies that are more ambitious than others, more countries that are more ambitious than others. They don't have the same goals, but when they have, often it's they target 1.5 degree or 2 degrees, or way below than 2 degrees, which is between 1.5 and 2, or even net zero. Um, so that's it. So countries and private companies don't have can settle their targets as they want.
Do you know what is the average global temperature?
Oh, what I know is that, for example, the global warming
Right.
is about 1.1 degrees now, and we know that we will at least there will be at least 1.5 degrees in 2050, and we'll try to decrease the speed we'll get there.
So you said 1.1 degree from which degree?
Oh, from the pre-industrial area,
I see.
because
This is many years ago, actually.
it's during the 19th century when we started using fossil fuels.
Okay, so they compare like the average of the world between
Yeah.
almost 100 years ago.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Okay, so we increased so far 1.1.
yeah, yeah. So for million years, human impact didn't do anything on global warming, because we didn't use fossil fuels. There wasn't huge deforestation, etc. But now that we started to use coal, oil, gas, etc., now we are completely modifying climate on Earth because of greenhouse gases.
So everything happened because of the human needs and
Yeah.
more technology comes into the world.
And what is crazy is that we wanted to use fossil fuels to improve our life conditions, and now, because we use them, it will indirectly harm our lives.
Yeah, yeah. That's true. We never realized that this came back to us. What you gonna ask?
And there are more people in the world, then be more resources need more fuel use maybe. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be even worse the temperature.
Yeah, but talking about people, there's there's one thing that is essential, but most people don't know that 10% of the 10% that are the richest people on Earth, they emit 50% of greenhouse gases.
Oh,
Basically, because when you get more money,
uh-huh.
you consume more, you
Right.
drive you more, you go on vacation,
Right.
you eat beef,
Uh-huh.
etc., etc. That's why richer people emit way more greenhouse gases.
Like the more you consume, the more you go, like the
Yeah.
more you produce the greenhouse gases.
So at the same time, we'll have to, like, for the same, I don't know, kilogram of sugar we produce, we'll try to make it as less harmful as possible for climate. And at the same time, we also have to reduce our consumptions of goods and services. This puts back into question all of our economy all over the world. We have to, like, people will lose their job, for example, for I don't know, airplane companies. For example, they will have to degrowth basically. And so these people who were working there, they'll have to change their jobs maybe. And this is why I'm passionate about. I'm very interested about a book. I'm sorry, it's in France. There was the main organization which is called the Shift Project. It's a think tank. They think about how we should change France's economy to make it sustainable, basically. And for many years they've worked on it, and now their report is published. And so I'm excited to read it.
But that's good to first have the awareness, like be passionate about it, and I think the action will follow automatically.
So this organization, they will publish a book on how, I mean, the report on how the people should change their behavior to,
Yeah.
to make sure that there will be less global
I
warming.
think it's more. So there are books about how can I reduce my carbon footprint. This is more for policymakers,
Ah,
and also for the private sector to be aware of the good practices, what will happen to them. Yeah, mostly for decision makers
decision.
in the public and private sector.
So today we gain a lot of knowledges, and I hope we have more awareness on this. Also, the one who listen to
Right. I'm
pollution.
not just aware. I'm scared. Scared of myself. Scared of the future. If someone have kids, their kids probably never gonna be able to live the way we live.
But it's just the
Things.
beginning. Once you learn a lot, then you'll, like, okay, well, have to make a lot of efforts,
Right.
but we can do it. We know how to reduce our carbon emissions. We just have to do it. But all actors have to be part of it.
We hope everyone will do it. Do something.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope this video useful, and if you have any question for Jeff or for us, you can write in the comment below in the YouTube. And thank you everyone for watching us
Yeah.
today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ka.
See you in
สวัสดี
next
ค่ะ
episode. สวัสดีค่ะ
Thank you.
โอ้